Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. I think you have whetted the appetite of this audience, and may I request Professor Kechichian to start the ball rolling with the questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Singh. I must say that I have been participating in these sessions for several months now, and Ambassador Mohan Kumar's presentation is hitting the ball out of the park. It is brilliant. Thank you very much for a brilliant presentation. Bahrain is it's a wonderful country. It has, as you've said, it has tremendous opportunities, and it's a long-established liberal society. I have two questions I want to ask you. You hinted first at the liberal background of the Bahraini society. So logically, after what happened in 2011 and ever since that time, my first question is, do you think that Bahraini liberalism is under threat for a variety of reasons? But I would like to hear the opinion of a learned individual, ambassador who has served there. Do you fear for Bahraini liberalism? A second question, now of course, in the 1970s or in the 1960s, before Bahrain became independent, the government of Iran, at that time the Shah of Iran, considered Bahrain to be its 14th province. There was a United Nations delegation that went, and they had a voting process going on, and the majority of Bahrainis decided that they would not want to join Iran. They wanted to become an independent country, which is what happened. But Iran maintains tremendous influence in Bahrain, even today. So my second question is, and you mentioned, of course, the pro-American and pro-British security relationship that the Bahraini government has. So my second question is, do you think that the Iranian influence on Bahrain would remain the same, diminish, or grow over the next few years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. What was the first question again? And second one was the Iranian angle. The first one?
Whether or not Bahraini liberalism is under threat.
Yes, thank you. My answer to the first question is no, and that is because I see tremendous possibility with the assumption of power as prime minister by the crown prince. There has been a shift in power politics in the Bahraini regime. Everybody knows this. Again, it's public knowledge that and many of these regimes, it is the case. You have a liberal faction and you have an illiberal faction as well. Now, Crown Prince Sheikh Salman is of course, now Prime Minister Sheikh Salman is known as a very liberal individual. But I would say this much, without being politically provocative, that in the past, he was hamstrung by the illiberal faction. Now, I believe there is a tremendous opportunity for Bahrain to be liberal, even more liberal, because of the assumption of power by Sheikh Salman as prime minister. I would attach a lot of importance. You will have to give him some time, obviously, but those of us who know him know that his heart is in the right place. He has a vision for Bahrain, which is pluralistic, and I believe he's democratically very, very rooted. So I personally was delighted when Sheikh Salman assumed office as the prime minister following the death of his father's brother, who was the earlier prime minister. So I would say the answer to your question is I think Bahrain will move in the right direction. It'll become even more liberal. Secondly, on the Iranian influence, you're absolutely right. I mean, Iran did claim Bahrain. There was a referendum. The referendum went marginally in favor of Bahrain. It was not like, it was an overwhelming outcome. Having said all of that, I have repeatedly asked my American and British colleagues when I was ambassador there, my question would always be, do you have concrete evidence that Iran is providing military aid to some of these activists? And I must say the answers I've always got is no. We are not sure about that. There were odd cases of some boat being seized from the coastline with Iranian weapons or whatever. But other than that, my sense is, of course, Iran is interested because Iran has this view that Shias everywhere actually belong to them. Ambassador Sanjay Singh would, I mean, I hesitate because he was ambassador Iran and he knows so much more about this issue than I do. But looking at it from the Bahraini angle, I think it is true that the Shias have this solidarity, if you like, which can be traced back to the Iranian fount. But other than that, I don't think Iran meddles in the affairs of Bahrain anymore. And of course, when you talk of security, don't forget the American Fifth Fleet is stationed there. I mean, it's just next to the Strait of Hormuz. So I think all these things put together, my view is, I think Bahrain has a bright future. You know, bear in mind that Bahrain has no oil or very little oil. There is an oil field shared by Saudi Arabia and Bahrain at the border, but that's not much. So Bahrain has to constantly innovate itself. It used to be the banking center of the Gulf until Dubai came onto it. It invented Formula One until Dubai got it. So, you know, Bahrainis have a way of saying that, listen, we always invent things, but then somebody else grabs it and does better. So there is that issue as well. But I think the Bahrainis have a role to play. And I'm thinking, and we will go to the joint statement issued. There has been a meeting between the External Affairs Minister and the Bahraini Foreign Minister on April 7th. But I would like to discuss it towards the fag end of my presentation, because it's a joint statement worth looking at. They seem to have covered a lot of areas where I think India can support Bahrain in terms of cyber security that can become the hub for the Gulf, because Bahrain offers a very friendly environment. Believe it or not, the HSBC living index puts Bahrain as one of the best places to live for an expatriate. It's wonderful to live in Bahrain. If you ask me, frankly, I don't want to mention any other city in the Gulf. I would any day choose Bahrain to live. It's so nice because the people make it nice, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving a vote of confidence for Bahrain. But you know, you and Professor Kechichian touched a very, very important subject of identity. Now, identity, what goes to make an identity is a very important question. Is it ethnicity? Is it religion? Is it language? Is it the place where you live? And these are various concomitant, depending on how you play them, each of these assume the most important role. And this is the question that is also facing Iraq to some extent. It's also facing various other countries. So I think this is something that I recommend to Mudassir to have a session on with some expert talking about identities in the region. And what are these identities in the sense, are they religious, are they ethnic, are they linguistic? But then let me ask you to make your comments and ask your questions.
Thank you, sir. I certainly take note of your suggestion, and we will certainly have. That is a very good suggestion, and it's a very important issue. And thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for your very fascinating comment on what was happening in Bahrain during your, and you very rightly pointed out that you were in Bahrain at a very historical moment, and certainly we enjoyed it a lot. I have three very quick questions. One is regarding the, as you mentioned that during the when the events was going on, there was no need for actually issuing a travel advisory or a contingency plan and everything. But was it only at the diplomatic and at the Indian community level that the discussion was going on, or was there some degree of political understanding between the leadership in Bahrain and India also going on, or some sort of a discussion as to how to handle the situation? Secondly, there is after the Arab Spring events, there were news about Bahrain giving citizenship for people from outside, Bahraini, outside Bahrain, to join security forces. So, mostly the news was indicating that it was people from Pakistan who were, enlisted in the security forces, and they were also being offered citizenship. Was there any such sort of a development between, India or Bahrain? For example, did any Indian community people, they also kind of, were offered citizenship or joined, as Bahraini citizen? And thirdly, why did it take such a long time? And I think in the beginning you were mentioning that also, for a visit from an Indian Prime Minister to Bahrain. I mean, since 1947, it was only in 2018 that our Prime Minister visited. So
2019, yeah.
2019, yes, sorry. So why did it take so long? Thank you.
So maybe I'll begin with the last one, because it's, I think you have to pay some credit to the present government, especially the late Sushma Swaraj, I would say. She made it a point. I remember her asking, I just happened to be around because I just come from Bahrain, and she was asking her director and joint secretary, please give me the list of countries which have never been visited by the Indian foreign minister. And this guy came up with such a long list. She was hoping it would be 2025. I think the director said, Madam, ye to 4-5 page hai. She said, are you kidding me? Nobody has gone. So I think this is something you have to go back to the kind of priorities that India had. I mean, for example, I was Deputy High Commissioner in Colombo, and successive ambassadors, we begged Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and even people before that to come to Colombo. It again took this Prime Minister to go to Colombo. Everybody accepts 1987 was a disaster, right? We had the IPKF, fine. But you have to, as a country, put these things behind you. And they were saying, please ask your Prime Minister to come. So I don't think it was just Bahrain. Ambassador Sanjay Singh, I don't want to put you on the mat, sir, but since you were secretary, you may have a better answer for this than me. I must say I've never functioned as secretary in Delhi. My position was joint secretary. After that, I've been ambassador. But I think, this is not, the only answer I can give you is it is not just Bahrain. It is a whole range of countries. So you have to look for the answer elsewhere. The other two questions you asked me, one was whether there was some understanding between India and Bahrain for the repatriation of people and so on. I would say no. I mean, one of the great things about Bahrain, it's like, and again, I can be frank, if you're Indian ambassador Bahrain versus Sanjay Singh would agree with me, by and large, you have more latitude and more scope, more maneuver for action as Indian ambassador to Bahrain. Pakistan, every Indian is an external affairs minister. Every Indian is an expert on Pakistan. They will tell you what to do. So Bahrain has no such baggage. Pretty much you are left on your own. So I must say on this issue, I went purely by the wish of the community. There was absolutely no dissenting voice. All community leaders told me, we are going to stay put here. Now, I'm not saying that all of the reasons had to do with loyalty to Bahrain, or some of them were economic as well. Many of these people are poor laborers who have taken loans from Kerala. It would be very difficult for them to go back, frankly. That could have also played a part. But the view was clear. On the citizenship, if I may, again, and I don't think this is any secret, my first day, I must tell you, as Indian ambassador to Bahrain. So I enter the house. It was also my first ambassadorship, by the way. So I really went with stars in my eyes. You're waiting 25 years to become ambassador. Those days, you wouldn't become ambassadors in 14 years as you do now. You had to wait 25 years. Ask Ambassador Sanjay Singh. I think he waited even more. Of course, he was secretary, but those were different times. So I waited 25 years to become ambassador. So I went in. And then the guard who, I told the guard that, you are the Bahrain, every ambassador is given a Bahraini guard, a security guard to stay put in the embassy compound. So I looked at him and I said, I spoke to him in very chaste Oxford English. How are you? And he says, "Aap Hindi mein kyun nahi bolte?" I said, "Where are you from?" And then he said, "I am from Pakistan." I said, "Good God, and you are going to guard me?" He said, "Fikar mat kariye, aapke liye jaan de denge." So that was my first surprise. And I told this to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and National Security Advisor when I met him. He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes, I'm being guarded by a Pakistani guard." And that is because they have, and this is no secret again, because Bahrain does have a tradition. I think it's stopped now, but they used to have the tradition of getting Pakistanis to work in the security forces. And this was a point of contention by the Shias with the regime. They used to say, "Why are you bringing these guys? Why don't you trust us? Why do you need people from outside?" So I know this was a debate going on. But when it comes to India, I also asked, I used to jokingly ask our friends from Kerala, "You guys are doing everything here. Why don't you get into the security forces?" They said, "No, sir, we won't do that." So I think there is an Indian disinclination as well, if you like, not to get into politics and not to get into security, which between you and me as ambassador, I was quite happy. I don't think we needed this extra layer of problem, frankly. So I don't think that happened. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Nina, you had a question, but perhaps it is something which is more generic.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador Singh, and thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for giving us such a fascinating talk. I would like to ask how the COVID-19 crisis influenced Indian-Bahrain relations. Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed that.
Yes. How did the COVID-19 crisis influence India-Bahrain relations? Thank you.
Really sorry.
Oh, I will repeat it. How did the COVID-19 crisis influence India-Bahrain relations?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I missed the COVID part, whereas that should have been uppermost in my mind. Anyway, so I think I just looking at the joint statement before I walked into the session, and I find that we have donated 100,000 doses of Covishield to the Bahrainis. So that is point number one. Point number two, we have thanked the Bahrainis for taking care of the Indians during the COVID time, which includes vaccination and so on. And this is something they're very good at. As I can't repeat enough that the Bahrainis have a wonderful way of taking care of the community. So that is something you can never fault the Bahrainis. More importantly, they have sought investment for setting up facilities for manufacturing pharmaceutical products and vaccine products in Bahrain. Just an idea which has come out of the most recent joint statement on April 7th, when the External Affairs, this was, by the way, the third meeting of the High Joint Commission. Actually, I finished off 2, so there should have been much more. But obviously, they've not been able to meet. So I'm glad they met. And one of the things that India is doing is also trying to see if we can set up a vaccine manufacturing capacity in or a facility in Bahrain. So I think on the whole, the Bahrainis feel very happy that they've got the cooperation they required from India on the COVID situation. We also, I think, created a bubble, a travel bubble between Bahrain and India. So there was no problem with regard to repatriation. There was no problem with regard to Indians going there, seeking work and so on. So on the whole, I would say that cooperation has been excellent.
Thank you. I see Professor Gulshan is here. She is the doyen of West Asia Studies. So would you like to come in, ma'am? While she is doing that, let me ask Ambassador Mohan Kumar, you were there and the Manama Dialogues took place while you were there. What did you see as the significance of the Manama Dialogues?
Yeah, that's an excellent question as well. I think because Bahrain is the only country in a way that was so open that they could tolerate people coming and expressing a different point of view. And since Bahrainis genuinely take pride in allowing for a certain kind, a limited amount of dissent, if you like. So it was quite logical that Bahrain should have instituted the Manama Dialogue. The idea was that in the West Asian region in general and Gulf in particular, this would be a dialogue in which people could frankly exchange views with each other. So of course there were limits, but within those limits, it used to be a dialogue in which people would express themselves very, very frankly. It rivaled the Munich Security Conference and the Shangri-La dialogue in that sense. It was always billed as one of those dialogues which attracted everybody. I remember Hillary Clinton came, John McCain came, a lot of people came, the Saudi minister, Turkey, he came as well. And we would always have very, very interesting conversations in the Manama Dialogue. And for Bahrain, it was an extension of brand Bahrain. That because Bahrain is a place where you could come and exchange views honestly, you could disagree. And they said, we should keep this alive, this Manama Dialogue. And I thought the Manama Dialogue just after the Arab Spring was absolutely, I mean, that speech by Sheikh Salman, who's today the Prime Minister of Bahrain, was amazing. It was an amazing speech because it just happened after the Pearl roundabout structure was raised, and it was a difficult situation for Bahrain. And I thought he made the right kind of speech, appealing to Shias and Sunnis, to everybody, and saying that, listen, we must all come together. So I thought Manama Dialogue in many ways represented the best of Bahrain in terms of providing a platform for disagreeing, for exchanging views, and so on.
Before we end this conversation is that Bahrain is the first, let us say, services capital of the Gulf. And now it has competition from Dubai, it has competition from Doha, it has developing competition from Abu Dhabi. So what would you say is the future of Bahrain as the hub for financial, transportation, and other activity in the Gulf?
This is a tough one. And Bahrainis keep asking themselves the same question. They are tired of losing out to some of their richer neighbors, frankly, because they feel that they've got entrepreneurial talent. Ultimately, it will boil down to three things, in my view. The answer to your question. One, can they be more open than those other societies you mentioned? Can they be more open? Because if you're just as open as Dubai, why would you go to Bahrain? You would go to Dubai. So I think that is the first. Second, can they unleash entrepreneurial talent of everybody who lives in Bahrain? If they can provide a business environment in which there is very little regulation and allow these people to innovate, that would be wonderful. And the third, their future is inevitably tied to Saudi Arabia, frankly, because a good part of their budget, frankly, is financed by Saudi Arabia. Now, to the extent that Saudi Arabia feels oil is, as long as we all agree that oil is not the future, that oil is the past, and Saudi Arabia has realized that, and they are investing in a lot of diversification. So the last point I want to make is it will really depend on the extent to which Bahrain can diversify its economy. Can Bahrain provide a valuable back office for Saudi Arabia? That is really the question, frankly, because it'll be very difficult otherwise for Bahrain to compete with the other neighbors that you mentioned. But if they can provide a gateway, an outlet for Saudi Arabia and then to the world, that would be the best positioning of Bahrain, in my view.
Let me take up another question from what you have just said, is that I'd request you to tell us, how does Bahrain provide a gateway for our relationship with the rest of the GCC countries? And what was the outcome of His Majesty's visit to India?
So, it's very hard for me to say that Bahrain will provide a gateway to the Gulf, because what the present government has done is they've taken the relationship with UAE and Saudi Arabia to another level, frankly. So we don't need Bahrain to really reach Saudi Arabia and UAE. That would be wrong in my humble view. So the importance of the King's visit, to go back to your question, I think very simply was to reinstate the mechanisms which had fallen into disuse. So we set up the High Joint Commission so that at least foreign ministers can meet. We made sure that there would be visits between the two countries. The Foreign Office consultations was resumed, and we said we will make it more regular. So it was really a question of providing momentum. And as far as I was concerned, the important thing was the Prime Minister had to make a visit. So I'm glad he made it in 2019. A 5-year gap, I agree with Mudassir, is still too long. It should have been shorter. But I really do believe that Bahrain's, I remember the former Prime Minister asking me, can you please tell me why Bahrain is important? Sometimes you are surprised by questions like this because you were there for 5.5 years or whatever, but other people may not know. So I thought to myself, the only thing I can really tell him, and you have to be careful before you answer prime ministers. So I thought for a minute and then said, sir, 30% of oil goes through Strait of Hormuz, and Bahrain is right there with the Fifth Fleet. He said, I understand. Because he was an economist, he immediately understood that this was the important. And frankly, I also thought to myself, this is the main reason why Bahrain is strategically important, because it's so close to the Strait of Hormuz. And for India, it's 350,000 or 400,000 Indians. So
thank you very much. And I would echo what Professor Kechichian has said, that this was an outstanding talk among all our webinars that we have had. Thank you very much. And I hope you'll be back on this forum again to share your views. And just a matter of clarification, that if the Prime Minister of India visits every state in India and one country every month outside India, he'll be out of Delhi for 1 week,
that's
a
true.
month. So you decide as citizens of India how many weeks you would like a Prime Minister to be out of Delhi. I leave it at that. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohan Kumar, an ambassador. He's a man of many parts, the director of a very famous, heading a very famous institute in India. Thank you very much for sparing your time and talking to us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Lovely meeting all of you. Bye.